We'll get started here in just a minute. Give a couple more minutes for folks to start filtering in, and we'll get started here in a minute. It's a couple minutes, so we'll go ahead and get started as others filter in. Thanks for joining today. My name is Andy Gower. I'm the head of Partner and Solutions Marketing here at Portworx by Pure Storage. I'm excited to be joined here today by Bhavin Shah, who is our Senior Technical Marketing Manager here at Portworx. And today we're going to talk to you about how to protect the next generation of container platforms with Portworx and AWS. We're going to talk about what we're doing together, and we're going to start off with a brief market overview. What are the challenges we're seeing? What are the opportunities we're seeing? We're going to introduce what Portworx is and what the portfolio does as a whole, but then really quickly narrow in on what are Portworx and AWS doing together. What is the backup as a service offering that we announced at KubeCon earlier this year? We're going to show it to you with a demo, and then we're going to have some Q&A at the end and some next steps. We're here throughout. We're looking at the chat, so if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to ask them in the chat. If not, we will take them at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the conversation and start with the market overview. Let's start setting the stage about why this is so important, why it matters as enterprises think about backup and recovery for the modern application. So I want to start at kind of the 50,000 foot level. We all now know that backup is essential for enterprise applications, and for different enterprises, it might be for different reasons, or it might be for all the reasons you see on the screen. For some enterprises, it's about preventing data loss. It's about preventing ransomware attacks. It's about protecting the enterprise and the data that's associated with those mission critical applications. For others, it's about compliance. There may be things around GDPR. There may be things around data locality when it comes to specific industries like financial or healthcare industries, or it may be a combination of both. And on top of that, there may be some specific recovery demands that either come internally from the business or come externally from regulators or others on the outside. So I have to have recovery of this core application in less than an hour. I have to be back online in less than 5 minutes, less than 2 minutes, whatever those numbers are. And so for whatever reason you're here, whatever reason data protection matters to you, we know it's essential for the application, and it's essential as we move from a traditional world to the more container-centric world that we're all living and breathing today. Some additional stats that we found both through our own surveys and others: 91% of organizations are using Kubernetes in production today or are planning to. So our data protection solutions need to be really locked into that kind of framework with Kubernetes and what we're doing with Kubernetes. 82% are concerned that their current data protection solution that maybe was architected before Kubernetes came about won't meet their future business challenges. And 67% of organizations are struggling to find the right data protection solution for their cloud native app. So kind of look at this together and say, hey, we know we need data protection. We know we're moving to Kubernetes, but we're not quite sure that the current solution will meet the future needs. And we'll talk about why that is in a minute. Some additional data points just around data protection and what's really top of mind. Ransomware, as we know, continues to be at the front page. We see it day in and day out. This company had to pay X millions of dollars. This company had something go offline because of unspecified ransomware attacks. And it shows in the numbers. So 94% of recent ransomware attacks attempted to modify or delete backups. So it wasn't just someone getting in there. They were attempting to actually do something to the backups to make it harder to get back online. 76% of organizations ended up having to pay their ransoms because it was the only option to them because they didn't have that backup or they didn't have a data protection solution in place. And 59% are increasing spend for backup services specifically as a result of the threat of ransomware. So data protection, always been relevant, more relevant now, and ransomware continues to be a big piece of that puzzle. Now, setting the stage for kind of the rest of the conversation, let's start talking about why traditional backups just don't quite work, why they aren't quite the right tool, and what we should be looking for in a data protection solution for the new enterprise, for the new architecture, for the new modern application you're building. So first and foremost, traditional backup is time consuming. It's manually focused. You have to manually add clusters. You have to use machine focused solutions that are trying to back up or snapshot the entire volume as opposed to just the Kubernetes application, just the containers you're looking for. You need more compliance. So maintaining compliance and security against ransomware attacks is a challenge. Traditional backup was architected to prevent ransomware in a VM machine-centric world, not in a Kubernetes-centric world. Data at risk for failure or outages. We know that in this cloud-native world where everything has to be up online 24/7, 365, even a few hours of service outages can cost millions and millions of dollars. So an older solution that was built to get you back online, but did it in a slower fashion, isn't going to work in the modern age. And most importantly, the inability to back up and restore anywhere. We know that multi-cloud, multi-region, multi-zone is a core component of anyone's cloud-native strategy, and being able to both migrate the data, but also back up in multiple locations is a key aspect of any data protection solution today, and traditional backups just don't provide the capability that you need to do this. And so you're left exposed. So if you use a traditional backup approach to a Kubernetes world, you're left exposed on kind of four big fronts. You have slow, expensive procedures, data loss and slow recovery, no self-service or manual intervention when things go awry, and you have compliance and governance black holes because you can't see to a container granular level the things that you need to see. And it all comes down to the way a traditional application was architected versus a Kubernetes application. It makes sense why we would need a slightly different solution. A traditional application has the app, it has the database, the SQL Server, Oracle, whatever app you're using at the top. You have some compute, and you put it on a storage. You put it on a single server or a set of clusters, and it sits there forever. Maybe you upgrade that storage layer once every 5 years, so you have to do a little bit of movement, but it really sits there forever. And so you have a machine-centric backup for your app and data where all you need to do is snapshot the storage layer. You snapshot it, you back it up, you restore it, and you can rely on that for an extended period of time. In the Kubernetes world, the app is king, the app is centric. And what's so important about Kubernetes and schedulers like EKS and others is they're dynamic. They allow for the application to be distributed. They allow for the application to be spread across multiple nodes, multiple storage arrays, multiple areas, and they scale much faster and more quickly than traditional applications. So how would you even take a traditional backup tool that's focused on the left here and apply it to a place where your application one day might be on SAN, might be on a cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So we need a data protection solution that's architected for the right, not architected for the left. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about what I consider the 5 keys, the key requirements that you need to look for in a modern data protection solution. So number 1, container granularity. So to me, container granularity is the most important thing that you should be looking for in a data protection tool. And it's because as we just talked about on the prior slide, your containers, your applications, they move, they vary, they shift, they go up, they go down, they scale to be 10,000 containers and they scale back down to be 5,000 containers. So, or even down to 10 or 5 or 3 containers. So as you are making backups, as you're putting together a backup strategy, you need to be able to identify the individual containers at the granular level so you can back up just the containers you need. Rather than spending money to back up entire volumes of containers that you're not using or aren't relevant to that specific backup, you want to be able to back up just the containers you need and restore them wherever you want, as opposed to a traditional world where you're backing up an entire volume and spending a lot of money on over capturing the data. Number 2, speaking Kubernetes. So this is, again, a very important component of a modern data protection tool. Traditional data protection tools, they don't speak Kubernetes, they speak VMs, they speak machines. We need a data protection solution that understands what a container is, that understands what a pod is, that understands what a namespace is, that understands how all of these different things fit together. So when we ask it to back up a specific application or a specific namespace or a specific container, it knows what we're talking about and it's able to capture that data, restore it, move it to a different location, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to speak Kubernetes is a vital component of a modern data protection tool. Number 3, application consistency. So we know that in the Kubernetes world, one of the great benefits is the ability to use distributed applications, microservices, distributed databases, all sorts of things that let us spread out our containers, they let us spread out our application in lots of different places. But when it comes to backup and restore that, we need to make sure that we are backing up that application consistently. We need to have a tool that lets us quiesce those different locations, those different data services or different databases, those different locales where the container is at the same time. So when we back it up and restore it, the entire application is consistent from one place to another. We're aware of all the different intricacies of that application. A traditional tool doesn't speak Kubernetes. It doesn't understand that a distributed database is part of your application. So when you go to do that backup, you lose data in the process. You don't necessarily have a clean backup, and you don't have a clean restore. So application consistency is a key component of your backup tool. Number 4, and it kind of trails on that same idea, a complete app backup. So as we know, their traditional tools often focus just on the data, and it makes sense because when you back it up and restore it, you're not really changing anything else about the application. But when it comes to Kubernetes, it's important that you don't just get the data. It's important that you get the Kubernetes objects, you get the metadata, you get everything associated with that application. So when you back it up and you restore it somewhere else, everything is there to rebuild the application. You're not having to go manually type in the application configurations, the Kubernetes configurations, bring the objects in. You can back it up and restore it and have it off and running as soon as you back up and hit the restore button. So complete app backup is number 4. And last but not least is multi-cloud support or multi-zone support, or where, kind of depends where you are, but multi-cloud, multi-zone support. Having the ability to not only back up and restore between different nodes, different storage locations, different zones, but between different clouds. So you may have your primary cloud on AWS, which we're talking about today, but you may have a backup cloud that's on-prem, a backup data center on-prem, or a backup cloud on one of the other cloud providers. And you want to be able to take that backup that you have on AWS and store it elsewhere. So if something goes down, you can restore it from Google, you can restore it from IBM, you can restore it from Azure. On a similar vein, you may even want to have backups in different zones. So you may have your primary site on US East 1 on AWS, but you might have a backup on US West 2. And so being able to easily take those backups and have that multi-cloud, multi-zone, multi-region support is key for any modern data protection solution. And I think GigaOM really summed it up best in terms of why all these things matter, or what you should be thinking about as you build out your modern data protection architecture. Without container granular backup options for Kubernetes, enterprises are exposed to data loss, downtime, and by extension, lost customer loyalty. So I think if we keep those 5 things I just talked about in mind, that will provide a foundation to look for in that modern data protection solution. Okay, so what are we doing then with AWS? What does that lead into between Portworx and AWS, and how does that feed into our backup as a service? So we announced our backup as a service back at KubeCon to bring our industry-leading backup tool to an as-a-service offering on Amazon EKS. And it's all about providing really 3 things. Scalable data protection services, we want to simplify management, and we want to accelerate your Amazon EKS app protection. So you can easily be building apps on EKS and back them up quickly and easily with Portworx Backup as a Service. And what we're focused on, and I promise this will be one of my last 2 slides, and I'll turn it over to Bhavin for technical discussion, but really it's about simplifying day 0 and day 2 operations. We want them to be simpler than ever with a managed cloud control plane that speeds up your implementation of data recovery objects while making your backup fast, easy, and secure. So what does that mean? We want to bring you backup as a service so you can point and click to your applications at the container granular level, at the application level, aware level, and back up and restore them quickly and easily between AWS locations, between AWS zones, or wherever your application lives. So why Portworx Backup as a Service specifically? And Bhavin will get into all of these in a second with the demo in much greater detail, but really it's 4 big things. We safeguard your applications at speed. We allow enterprises to sleep sound with safe and secure data protection. And what I mean is sophisticated RBAC and 321 compliance. We ensure business continuity with very tight RTO and RPO objectives. And we give you the ability to migrate your apps anywhere. So you can back up from any cloud, you can restore to any AWS location or third-party location if you choose. And as I said, we are building this on top of our industry-leading PX backup tool, which has been recognized for a number of years by GigaOM as a leader in Kubernetes data protection. So with that, enough from the marketing guy. I'm going to turn it over to Bhavin to go into the technical details and talk a little more through a demo. Bhavin, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen and we can get started.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know Andy promised demo, but I do want to show a few slides, and then we'll definitely get to the demo where we'll look at how PX Backup as a Service can help you accelerate that app protection, the value prop that Andy mentioned. So let's talk about a few features that were introduced as part of Backup as a Service or as part of the latest PX Backup announcement, PX Backup 2.2. The very first one is specifically for AWS customers that are using EKS clusters to run their containerized applications. And this can be for test dev workloads or for running applications in production on any EKS cluster running in any region. So with the latest release from the PX Backup UI, instead of having to go and copy the kubeconfig files from each of your EKS clusters that you want to protect, you can just provide your AWS credentials, your access key and secret key ID, access key ID and secret key to PX Backup. It will automatically inventory and show you a list of all the different EKS clusters that those credentials have access to, and you can start adding those clusters into the PX Backup user interface and start protecting applications that are running on there. So as part of the demo, we'll see one such use case and see how easy it is to add an existing EKS cluster into PX Backup, and from that point, start protecting those applications. So this cluster auto discovery feature is a really cool one. Like I was at a conference a couple of weeks back, and it was a multi-day conference. The first day we was talking about this feature, and then next day the same guy came back and said, oh wow, this is really easy. Like he was able to install PX Backup and use the cluster auto discovery features to add all of his Amazon EKS clusters that were running in different regions. So that's an experience that we want to bring to all of our customers and accelerate that app protection timelines. Next feature that we added as part of this was the cloud hosted control plane. So delivering PX Backup as a service means that Portworx will host the control plane for you. So no longer do you need to install or stand up a dedicated Kubernetes cluster just to run your backup software or backup solution, and then worry about version upgrades or making sure you have deployed or given it enough resources so you can scale up your backup solution and protect more and more Kubernetes clusters that you might have. This control plane, or the backup as a SaaS service control plane, automatically scales up as you add more and more clusters. We host it for you, we maintain the versions for you, so you know that since this is a hosted service, you are getting the best, the latest and greatest features on day zero, rather than having to wait for upgrade cycle inside your own organization. And the best part about this is, regardless of where we host it as Portworx, you can use the backup as a service portal to protect applications that might be running on your Amazon EKS clusters, or the migration use cases that Andy mentioned, right? You can start adding your Azure EKS clusters, Google GKE clusters, and then move your applications between these different Kubernetes clusters as well. Next, let's talk about multi-tenancy. So this is a SaaS-based service. So we will have, it is a multi-tenant service. So you will have something called as an organization. And for the backup as a service offering, we did extend the roles and the roles and privileges that we had as part of PX Backup, and added a couple of additional roles. And these include things like organization admin and organization user. So organization admin can add more organization users, and they can create more backup as a service instances. So let's say you started small and you just had a backup as a service instance. We call it a service. So you just had a service instance for one of your development teams, but now you actually want to expand it and bring in all of your different development teams inside your organization. You can, as the organization admin, you can create individual services and add those developers from that team so that they can perform self-service access, and then go into the specific permissions around service admin, and application user. So the org admin is like the super user for your entire organization, but the service admin is kind of that super user for that service instance. So he or she can add more users, more developers, more application owners, and add those cloud accounts and backup targets. And the developer, at the end of the day, we need to make things simple for him or her. So all that they have to do is log in, discover their cluster automatically, and start creating those backup jobs on a self-service basis. So with PX Backup, with the multi-tenancy feature, you have role-based access control where you can have these individual roles assigned to different people, or if you want, if it's a small enough organization, you can just have one user with all of these different permissions. Next, let's talk about enhanced security. So one of the key features that we introduced recently was support for immutable backup snapshots being stored in an object lock enabled backup location. So these are your S3 buckets that have object lock or object lock retention enabled. So this is write once, read many. So once PX Backup creates an application backup, it stores it in an object lock enabled bucket, which can't be modified. So even if you have hackers that want to get in, encrypt your data, attack your organization with a ransomware attack, that's not possible. Even if PX Backup wants to change anything in the backup snapshot, we can't do that. And we'll talk about how we take different incremental and manual ad hoc snapshots and how they work with these immutable copies. But PX Backup as a service allows you to use these RBAC or role-based access control and the object lock retention features to protect your organization from ransomware attacks. So role-based access control, you can always make sure that only the right people have access to the right set of resources. And let's say if you get hit with a ransomware attack, you know there is an insurance policy, even though we don't want anybody to have to use it, but there is that object lock enabled backup snapshot in place where you can restore your application on a completely new Kubernetes cluster, maybe in a completely new AWS region, and restore your applications quickly to the second cluster if your first cluster has been compromised. So with that, let's switch it over to our demo section. And again, if you have questions with regards to any of these slides, feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and we can look at them while we're doing the demo or at the end, as Andy mentioned as well. So okay, I'm pretty sure you can see this as well. So what we have here is we have a couple of Amazon EKS clusters deployed for you. The white terminal session is our dev cluster, where I'm just building a new application which doesn't need ransomware protection, but I do want to make sure that I protect my application and create some backup jobs. So if I do a kubectl get all in the demo namespace, you will see that we have good point. I need to deploy that application. So let's go ahead and deploy that application. Okay, and then that's the backend Postgres component, and then once that's done, we'll apply the front-end component as well. But while we are waiting for the application deployment to complete, let's look at the second cluster that we have. This is our production cluster, quote unquote production cluster. It's again a simple EKS cluster that's running in USD East 1. It's running our WordPress site. So let's say I'm a small organization or a small startup, I'm hosting my blog on a WordPress site. I do want to make sure that that's protected. So even if I get hit by a ransomware attack and they encrypt my backend database, I can still restore my site and bring it back online as soon as possible. So if we do a kubectl get all in the WordPress namespace, you see that we have a couple of deployment objects, a couple of service objects, a couple of pods, and we can access this URL right here and validate that our application is up and running. Here you can see it's a simple WordPress site called Portworx demo site, safeguard your applications against ransomware attacks. And then if we click on the blogs, you'll see we have a couple of blog posts that have been published. Let's finish the deployment of our demo application on our dev cluster and do a kubectl get all in the demo namespace. Here you'll see our application is coming online as well. So we can copy this ELB load balancer endpoint and then paste it against our browser, and we'll look at this application as well. So again, since we are deploying a fresh ELB instance, it takes a couple of minutes for it to correctly route traffic to the EC2 instances on which the pods are running as part of our EKS cluster. So once it's online, we look at the application. In the meantime, let's look at our PX Backup as a service UI. So here, to log into PX Backup as a service, you just need to navigate to central.portworx.com. You, as the organization admin, you can start creating new services. So let's just look at what the workflow looks like, right? So if this is me logged in into our Portworx Central interface, and if I select SaaS version for PX Backup, I can either create a sandbox trial or I can create an enterprise licensed PX Backup service. If you are not sure, if you just want to start with the sandbox trial, which gives you a free 30-day access, you can do that. And if you don't want to like discontinue and like move all your clusters to the enterprise version, we do have that migration option where you can convert your subscription from a sandbox subscription to an enterprise subscription. So here I can click continue and I can just give it a name and read and agree the license agreement and hit submit, and that's it. That's how easy it is to create a new PX backup as a service instance. So we already have a backup as a service instance deployed for you. As you can see, we have our production cluster added just to show that we have some backup jobs running using the activity timeline. But before we add a new cluster, our dev cluster using the cluster auto discovery feature, let's look at a couple of things in the cloud settings menu. So here in the cloud settings, you can see we have added our AWS account. We have added a couple of backup locations. So the px-backup-dev S3 bucket is a regular or generic object storage location, which will be used for our backup location, for our demo applications on our dev cluster. But for applications that are running on our production environment, we want to enable that ransomware protection. So we have selected an object lock enabled bucket on the backend and added that to our PX backup UI. To add any new backup location, you can just give it a name, select the cloud account, enter the name of the bucket, and then specify the region. And if on the backend you have object lock enabled on your S3 bucket, it automatically shows up as an object lock bucket or an object lock backup location in the PX backup UI. And from a retention period perspective, whatever retention period you set in the AWS console. So for this demo, I've set a retention period of 7 days. That's what PX backup will take into consideration. So any schedule policies that you define will still give you the option to customize the interval at which backup jobs are triggered, but the retention period will defer to the S3 bucket that you have attached to the backup instance. So let's look at the schedule policies, and then we'll move on to adding our clusters. Let's go to not cloud settings. We looked at that. Let's go to schedule policies, and with schedule policies, you have the same logic. You have for schedule policies that you want to use to protect your object lock enabled backup applications or backups. You can create that and you will see the same icon here because again, as we discussed earlier, right, retention period is handled by the backend object store rather than PX backup. But if so let's show you how easy it is to create one, right? Demo 1 policy. So if I want object lock enabled for this, I can select that, and then the retention period thing, like I don't see an option to customize my retention period for my snapshots. But if I uncheck this box, you can see I can, as an admin, I can specify how many backup snapshots do I want to retain and how many of those I want to be incremental in nature. So this is how to differentiate between regular policies and object lock enabled policies that you might have in your environment. Now let's get to the good part, right? We'll auto discover our EKS cluster, add it to our PX backup UI, and start protecting that application. So here you can see a list of all the different cloud providers we support. You can select our AWS account that we saw in cloud settings earlier, and then you have an option of selecting a region. I have my clusters running in the US East 1 region, but again, based on where you have your clusters, you can enter the name for the region and hit discover clusters. At this point, we'll use your AWS credentials that you provided and talk to your AWS account, fetch a list of all the different clusters, EKS clusters that you have running. And then as you can see, we have a couple, like the demo-bisha-prod has already been added. That's why it's grayed out. Let's add the demo-bisha-dev cluster, which is our development cluster that's running Kubernetes version 1.21. I can select the cluster, I can hit add cluster, And that's it. That's how easy it is. No longer do I need to copy a command from the px backup UI or from any tool for that matter. I need to copy a command, go and execute a Helm chart on my destination cluster, and hope the connections work out, and hope that the kube config doesn't expire, the credentials don't expire. All of that has been eliminated, and we have made it super simple for anybody to get started with PX backup and start protecting those applications. So now you can see both the clusters that we have for our different types of applications. Let's go and refresh the page where we deployed our dev application. Okay, so it's a simple application where wherever we click on the screen, it generates the Kubernetes logo, it updates the number of database records or the number of logos we have, and it stores the X and Y coordinates for this Kubernetes logo in the backend Postgres database. So that's that simple demo application that we have. If we go back, let's go ahead and create a backup job, because since we generated some data, we want to make sure we protect it as well. It's running in the demo namespace, and PX backup, again, for users that have been using PX backup for a while might know that we do allow you to customize how you create these backup snapshots. So you can either select specific subset of resources using resource type. So I can just select deployment objects, I can just select persistent volumes, I can just select service objects, or I can leave it to all resources. The other way of filtering resources is through key value pairs. If I have specific labels that I've assigned to resources in an application, because I have multiple applications running in a namespace, I can specify those labels here, and PX backup will just protect the resources that have that specific label assigned to it. I haven't done anything crazy, so I only have all the resources for my object running in the demo namespace. I can select that, hit backup, and I can give my backup job a name. I can select the backup location. So here as well, I can see both the options available. I have my dev bucket, which doesn't have the object lock feature enabled. I have my production bucket, which has the object lock feature enabled. So I can choose to back up my application the way I want or where I want. Let's select the standard bucket in this case. And here I can take an ad hoc or a manual backup. So as soon as I hit create, it will initiate a backup job and create a point in time snapshot. Or I can do it on a schedule where I can select the schedule that has been set by my service admin. So this can be an hourly backup, daily backup, a weekly, monthly backup, or just a simple periodic backup as well. So I can select hourly backup and then hit create. So at this point, PX backup, the hosted version, will talk to your EKS cluster and start backing up the application that we have running on our dev cluster. We'll start by backing up the persistent volumes, and as soon as the persistent volumes are done, we'll protect all the different Kubernetes objects that are part of the app, all the things that Andy listed, right? We'll protect your config maps, your secrets, your deployments, any application data that you might have running on top of Kubernetes. All of that will be protected. If you just refresh this page, you will see that our backup job is in progress. If you want to learn more about like what's happening actively, you can click on these three buttons and click show details, and you can see that okay, volume backups are in progress, because that's the first step. And then once the backup is complete, you can see all the resources that have been protected by this backup job and where it's stored and all of those details. Let's refresh it a couple of more times, and you will see that since this is the first backup, it is a full backup. It takes a while, but once the first one is done, all the incrementals will be really quick. Okay, as you can see, our backup job was a success. You can monitor the status from here. We also give you an activity timeline, so you can go as far back as 24 hours. So every morning, your backup admin or your service admin can log into the PX backup instance, look at how the backup jobs did overnight, or do we need to change some things, or if I want to go far back as 30 days, I can do that and look at all of my backup jobs that I've been running for the past month as well. So now that we have created our backup job, I can look at show details, and here you can see that we have a config map that we protected, a couple of deployment objects, a couple of service objects. Everything has been backed up successfully. I can use this to restore my application to the same cluster or a completely new cluster. But before we perform any restores, let's go to the second cluster where it's our production cluster, and see how easy it is to create an object lock enabled backup snapshot as well. So here, all of our resources are running in the WordPress namespace, and I can just hit backup. and then WordPress backup manual. I can select the object lock enabled bucket in this scenario, and then I can do it on a schedule, but I already have an hourly schedule backup job running. So I'll just do a now or a manual backup. So the backup will be taken immediately. And then I can hit create, and the same thing, same workflow, right? PX backup will talk to the EKS cluster and create an application snapshot and store it in the object lock enabled S3 bucket. As you can see, we have an hourly backup that's running in the background since this morning and protecting our WordPress site. So all of these copies are stored in our object lock enabled bucket. So even if our cluster gets hacked or compromised, we know that we have a restore point available which I can use to backup application. And with this as a service offering, right, you don't have to worry about protecting your backup solution as well, because if you're running it manually or running it on your own, you do have to make sure that you have security policies in place to protect PX backup or any other backup tool that you might be using. With an as a service tool, the control plane is our responsibility. So you know that even if your primary cluster is compromised, you still have snapshots that are available and stored in an object lock enabled bucket, and you can still access the PX backup UI and use it to perform restore operations to a brand new cluster. So as you can see, the manual backup job that we created for object lock enabled functionality has been successful as well. You can differentiate between regular backups and object lock enabled backups because of this lock sign here. The ones that have these lock signs means they are stored in that object lock enabled bucket as well. So I can look at this, or I can switch to the dev cluster and perform a restore operation. So one thing that I wanted to highlight was, which I missed before I took that backup, on our dev cluster, if you look at the storage class that's available to me, I'm just using the AWS GP2 storage class. I don't have Portworx Enterprise, which is part of our Portworx portfolio, running on this dev cluster. I'm only running Portworx on my production cluster, but this doesn't stop me from using PX backup as my data protection tool. You can use PX backup, both the manual or the DIY versus the as a service offering, and use it to protect applications that might be running on EBS backed storage classes or EFS backed storage classes. And I can perform backups and restores to the same EKS cluster. Or an interesting use case is I can take something that's running on an EKS cluster with a GP2 storage backend and then restore it to a completely different EKS cluster with maybe a Portworx enabled storage backend. So that's what we'll test it out and see if it works, right? So let's navigate to our backup snapshot that we took a while back, and my session expired. So let me log back in and navigate. So this is what, if you have a backup as a service instance, this is what it will look like for us. I've just named it tech marketing because I'm a technical marketing engineer. And once I click on my service, I'll automatically be redirected to my PX backup service instance. I can hit the dev, I can select the dev cluster. I can click on the backups tab, find the snapshot that I want to restore from, and then let's perform a restore operation. So here, demo dev restore, and instead of selecting the dev cluster, let's select the production cluster, which has Portworx installed. So here I can use PX backup to customize my restore operation. So I can select what namespace I want to restore it to, and it will automatically see that my storage class on the destination cluster is set to default as Portworx, to automatically use that to perform this restore operation. So I can just hit restore because I want to restore the whole application as a unit, and it will initiate the restore operation, and it will start downloading or copying the snapshot from my S3 bucket onto my second EKS cluster and perform that restore operation in the demo namespace. So let's refresh this. As you can see, the restore operation was a success. I can go to my production cluster, or the cluster that we used to restore our application, and look at the objects in the demo namespace. As you can see, we have all of our service objects, all of our deployment objects, all of our pods ready to go. And then what we can do is wait for a couple of minutes for that ELB load balancer to kick in, and then we can just access this website, access this load balancer endpoint, and validate that all the data that we generated on the source side on the dev cluster is available on the destination cluster as well. So This opens up a couple of interesting use cases as well. If I want to perform, let's say, a blue-green application deployment, right? I can use PX backup to deploy maybe or like perform root cause analysis. I can take my production application, create a snapshot, restore it to a completely different cluster, and spend time troubleshooting on a non-production copy of my application, then trying to troubleshoot something live in a production environment. So all of those use cases where you want to move all of your applications, like including your application data, including your persistent volumes or your actual databases, you can use PX backup as the tool of choice to make those changes. Let's go back to the CLI session and let's look at a couple of different options as well. If we do a kubectl get PVC in the demo namespace, not sure why it picked up GP2 as the instance, but again, we have demos on YouTube available. If this didn't work out as live demos sometimes have glitches, but we do show you an operation where you can take backups and restore it to from a non-Portworx enabled to a Portworx enabled cluster as well. So with that, I think that's it for the demo section of this presentation. We'll see if we have any question or outstanding questions. Let me switch back to slides and I'll pass it over to Andy.
Thanks, Bob. And please feel free to ask questions. I don't see any right now, so while we wait, in case any come in, if you want to switch just to yep, perfect. I'll take this back. And yeah, please let me go back there and just say, so we started today with a conversation about why the current tools may not quite work enough, work in today's environment, why they might not quite fit the bill of what you're building today. And then we talked about kind of the 5 key things that you need in a modern data protection world. You need container granularity, you need app awareness, you need application consistency app awareness, you need to speak Kubernetes, you need to be able to back up the entire application, you need to be able to do hybrid multi-cloud deployments. And so from there, we talked about how Portworx and AWS are working together to provide a backup as a service option that really addresses these 5 things, that addresses these 5 core elements to give you a backup tool that is built for the modern enterprise. So it starts with that cloud-hosted SaaS control panel that Bob had talked about that ensures that you don't have to do anything around deployment or monitoring, or importantly, around upgrading, because all of that is hosted and managed by us. Then we talked about the auto discovery for EKS clusters. And as Bob had mentioned, it is so quick and easy that we were at a conference a couple weeks ago where it came up on the first day, and by the second day, the person we talked to came back and said, hey, I went home and I tried this out and was able to do it that easy. So auto discovery is a key function. Multi-tenancy support, a key requirement for anyone building modern applications, distributed databases using multiple services, and being able to manage all of them in a single pane. We talked about connecting clusters in any cloud, so not just where they're located on AWS, but also on other public clouds or on-prem or in other locations where Kubernetes exists. And you can connect those clusters and back them up to any AWS location or from any AWS location. And then last, we talked about enhanced RBAC support. So how RBAC makes it easy to deploy and scale while ensuring you have the protection you need and the access control you need for your data protection, your data services. So with that, I don't see any questions in the chat. And so I'll end here and just say, if you want to get started, you can get started with backup as a service today for free for 30 days on central.portworx.com. As Bob mentioned, we have a number of YouTube videos if you're interested in seeing any more on these demos or any additional demos or use cases that we didn't get a chance to chat about. We will also be at a number of AWS summits in the remainder of the calendar year. We'll be at AWS reInvent. So please, if you're in the area and you see us, come talk to us. We'd be happy to talk about this live with you in your city. Otherwise, thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate the time. We'll speak with you soon. Thanks a lot. Take care.